started here early on a Sunday morning. My name is Ken Dale, and you're in Bring the Rain cloud-powered continuous delivery. So there's a lot of demoing to do, so let's just get started here. So how many of you are in some way interacting with the cloud today? It's kind of like a show of hands thing. Whether you just put your files in the cloud or whether you have like virtual machines, Amazon, Azure, what have you. So, a good number of people in the room are, using the cloud in some respect. And a lot of organizations are moving a lot of the things to the cloud, for, the various reasons. I'm not necessarily going to get into those. That's not the point of the talk. But, there's this whole notion of just moving everything into the cloud. And if you're moving into the cloud and moving that direction, like, what's your current software development story look like? Are you, using the cloud, your fullest abilities for that? So that's kind of what we're going to look at, is being able to use the cloud in terms of like your daily software development story. And when I first assembled this talk, like I put together the abstract and I was interested in it and I knew some stuff about it, but I really didn't know what to expect, which was kind of cool because I eventually discovered like this stuff is really, really easy. And that's what makes it so powerful. The fact that you can pick it up in an afternoon and you can have something completely deployed, with no prior knowledge, and it just works and everything's awesome and easy. And I'll prove it to you. So the talk's a lot of demoing and looking at stuff. So basically, I'm going to deploy a Node.js application. If you're not familiar with Node.js, it's not really the point of the talk. I just picked something easy to deploy. Because sometimes with deploying like .NET, like we have to start explaining some things, and I don't necessarily want to get into that for the purposes of a simple demo. And we're going to use the services Travis CI and Heroku. And we'll also put the code up on GitHub to be able to interact with those. So I'll explain the services if you're not familiar with them as we go. So the first thing we need to do, I kind of broke this into some different pieces. So we need to create, we need to build, and we need to publish. So create, basically, we don't have any application at this point. So that's kind of the first thing we need to do, is we just need to create an application. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So first thing you do when you create any new application, you end up creating a folder for it. So we're going to call this Node.js Cloud CI Code on the Beach 2015. So I'm just going to make a folder for that. Go into that folder. And the folder's completely empty, of course. So I have pre-prepared kind of a nice starting point. So I'm just going to go chuck that in here so we can save a bunch of time. And I'll walk you through that so you can understand what's going on. But got to copy the files first. And the reason this is so large is I took all of the node modules folder, which is, you'd normally have to run like npm install and have it install a bunch of stuff to work with the Node.js app, but I've taken care of that already, so we don't have to rely on the network too much. So just to give you an idea of what this application does, it prints hello world to the screen. So pretty simple application. You don't need to understand JavaScript. You don't need to understand, Node, which is JavaScript on the server if you're not familiar with it. Yeah, so it's just a real simple application to, pump something out to a web browser. So we want to put this up on GitHub, so we need to create a new Git repository. So you do that with git init. And we actually need to go up to GitHub and actually create this guy. So on GitHub, there's like a way to create a new repository. I've already went to that page. So we just pop in the name of our repository. I usually, when I work with GitHub, I usually like to match the name of the folder with the name on GitHub, just for sanity's sake. So I'm calling it the same thing. And because I haven't used this name already, it gives me the nice little check mark. If you're not sure about names for your repositories, GitHub will automatically randomly generate you ones like squealing, octo, triple. So if you're, having problems naming your things, because that's one of the two hardest problems in software, what is it, cache invalidation and naming. So if you're having, substantial problems with naming, there you go. You can just call your thing squealing, octo, triple. So all right, so GitHub. So we're just going to make this a public repo because private costs money. And I'm just going to hit create repository. So it looks like the interwebs is working, which is great. So now we need to push this little application up into GitHub. So basically, you can just follow the instructions they kind of provided. So I'm just going to add some code, commit it, call this initial commit. But I'm just copy pasting from GitHub at this point, just following their instructions. All right, so if we come here, we refresh, we now have an application up here in GitHub. So here's this web.js that I was showing you on my machine. You know, it's up here in GitHub, it's up in the cloud, it's public. If you pulled out your phone or your laptop, you go up here and you could look at it just the same. So kind of showing you some more of what's going on here. So this is the Node.js file for those Node NPM people in the room. So just goes to this web.js, has some tests, nothing too fancy. So this is a nice simple application, and we've pushed it up into GitHub. We're ready to go to get it wired up because it now lives in the cloud. Now we can use cloud services to be able to interact with this guy. So if we pop back over here, so that's kind of step one. That's done. So we've now created an application in the cloud. But now we want to use an online service to be able to build our code and have it all done in the cloud without using my machine, without having my network involved, without using my CPU, without using my electricity. It's great. So for this, there are all sorts of different online services. The one I've selected for this demo is Travis CI. So Travis CI is free for private repositories. Where they kind of get their money is if you have a private, or it's free for public if I said private. So it's free for public, but if you need to build a private repository, that requires Travis Pro, and that's where they're going to start getting into the charging of you. So it's kind of how they're able to stay in business, I assume. So I've already logged into Travis CI. I'm sure you're all more than capable of creating your account. It links up with your GitHub account is how I have it working with mine. So whenever you come in here, you probably won't have anything here on this left bar, but there's this lovely little plus symbol here for add new repository. So if I click on that, and all right. So I have a whole list of repositories here. Your list might be larger or smaller than mine, but the real gotcha here, if you're working with this and you're running through this exact demo I'm doing, you're going to come down here and then you're going to start looking around. And you're going to be like, where's that repository I just created? Well, the gotcha is it last synced 15 hours ago. So that thing I just created doesn't show up in this list, so you have to click sync. It goes syncing from GitHub. So if you're taking notes, that's like one of the cool gotchas you got to ideally remember. So now we've got our Candale IV, Node.js, Cloud CI, Code on the Beach 2015. And so I'm going to basically turn this on in Travis CI, and this is a really labor-intensive and arduous task, and I'm totally joking because basically it's like flicking something on your phone because all you do is go like that, and you're done. Like at the end of the day, there's some sort of webhook magic communication happening. There's this integration between GitHub and Travis CI, but you don't need to know about it and you don't need to care about it. They've already taken care of all this handshake and working with their two services to be able to interact together. I think that's where a lot of the power of this comes, is this stuff is just really easy and it's really well thought out and everything just kind of just works. So you can focus on your application and your code rather than focusing on that infrastructure goo that maybe you care about it, maybe you don't, but if you don't care about it and you want to just get it done and over with as fast as possible, this kind of enables that sort of scenario. So we've got this thing wired up with Travis CI. So if we come over here and refresh, come on, interwebs. All right, so it shows up over here and it's gray. So it says there's no build. So by wiring it up, it doesn't immediately just go and build stuff. So you have to make some sort of change in order for it to, decide that it wants to start doing that for you. So I'm just going to open up the Atom editor here, and I'm just going to make a silly little change so we can get this guy to start working. So Atom editor, Web.js. Actually, we'll just monkey with the README. We'll just call this Node.js, Cloud CI. The change I'm making doesn't really matter. It's just the fact that I'm making a change. So edit README markdown. Basically, I'm just pushing a change up into GitHub here. So if we flick back over here to GitHub, we can see that there's my edit README markdown. I pushed a commit up into the cloud, into GitHub rather. And if we pop back over here to Travis CI, we can see, hey, it turned yellow. So what does that mean? That means it is currently building. And you'll also see that it failed, which is completely expected. And I'll show you why. So by default, when you wire up Travis CI, it makes this assumption that you made a Ruby app. I don't know what that means in terms of, I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I'm not a Ruby developer or whatever, but they make the assumption that you provided it no configuration, so it decided, hey, you're probably writing a Ruby app, right? Like, I don't know if they're doing any detection. I don't know what happens, but this is kind of what you end up with. You'll look at the build result and you see it like runs RVM, Ruby, but I'm writing a Node.js application, so clearly that's not going to work. So you'll also note that it says, if I zoom in a crazy amount, it says could not find .travis.yaml using standard configuration. So I'm assuming their standard configuration is Ruby. So we need to provide this .travis.yaml file as the configuration file. So different online services, some things are like point and clicky, but the way Travis does it is they put all the configuration, they kind of move a lot of that, at least, into your actual repository in the form of this configuration file, which I think is the right way to do things. That way it's completely reproducible, you can share it. It's not kind of locked into this point and click GUI. It's all, in this nice little file that's easy to understand. All your settings are in the same place. It's part of your that stuff. But Heroku provides a tool that's a command line tool called the Heroku tool belt. So if you want to use that, you can do a lot of this stuff from the command line, which also means you could script it if you wanted to, the possibilities are endless when you drop the command line. So we're going to do that. So I have the Heroku tool belt already installed. I've already logged in with it previously. So I'm just going to go to Heroku, create. That's all you type. So at this point, it's going out to Heroku, and it creates you a new application. I didn't specify a name, so it generates you one, which is another fun name generation portion of the talk. So we got Boiling Everglades 6589. I'm not sure that's somewhere I would want to vacation necessarily, because that sounds potentially terrifying. So I want to just rename that to match what we're doing here today. So you could, once again, you could do this on the Heroku website, but I'm just going to do it right from the command line, using their tool. So just rename it to, I'm just going to rename it the same as my folder name here. So now Boiling Everglades 6589 is now, matching our GitHub repo name. So one point to note here is whenever I did this Heroku create command, it also created me a Git remote on my own machine. So if I look at my Git remotes, not only do I have, GitHub itself, which is kind of the normal expected thing, it also created this Heroku remote for me. So I could actually use my machine to push to Heroku, but it's not really the way you want to do things. Individually it's not so bad, but in a team environment, you don't want to have just random people just pushing from their machines willy-nilly anytime they feel like it. So this kind of scenario could be enabled by this, but we want to have Travis CI be the thing that actually deploys to Heroku, because it'll do things like methodically do it only if our tests pass. Everything will be handled in the cloud. There's a record of it. There's logs of what took place. It's not just happening just on your, some random person's machine, and who knows what's out there in the cloud. So at this point, we have oh, that's right, I already put the proc file in here. So the proc file is what Heroku needs, but we have not yet configured Travis to know about Heroku. So we need to configure that, and Travis CI provides a nice utility, which I already have pre-installed on my machine, called, I don't know what they call it, if they call it like the Travis command line interface or something like that, but it basically exposes, this Travis command. So you just do Travis setup Heroku, which it's going to ask you a bunch of questions. You can say yes to a lot of them, not a big deal. And honestly, you could probably do a lot of this on your own, just with a text editor. But there's one caveat here. So I'm just going to pick the default name, bang. So this is the one that if you make the wrong decision, you will have your Heroku account potentially compromised. So it's asking you, do you want to encrypt the API key? To me, this is like one of the main reasons to use this tool is I don't really want to do like manual string encryption of my API credentials. So if you just answer yes here, that Travis tool knows how to take care of all of that for you. So that's why I recommend just using the tool. So if you pick no, and then we publish this out to GitHub, that means you just put your API key in the clear, which is basically full unfettered access to your Heroku account. So I haven't actually ever done it and timed how long it takes to get hacked, but let's not do that today at least. So if we look at what it did, a lot of this could be very easily done with just a text editor. So it's deploy, Heroku, API key, but the secure point is kind of where it's like having that tool makes that stuff really easy for you. So it takes care of that, and you know that it's done right, or at least you're relying on the fact that they did it right, and odds are they probably did it more right than I potentially would have. So, this was the result of it asking me a bunch of questions, but they've got this great tool to help you do that. So, just need to push, so add Heroku configuration to Travis CI. And we push that guy up there. So if I refresh Heroku, a little confused why I don't see that new application here. Oh, there we go. Maybe it was just a caching issue or something. So if we pop over here to Travis CI, hey, look, it's running our build. So that was quick. So if we pop into one of these, we can actually see it executing on the fly. So it just installed 3 Ruby gems, preparing the deployment, deploying application. So it's actually going through and deploying, and we're sitting here watching it. And this is on Travis CI itself. So wait for it. Installing node modules. Hey, caching. Yeah, so build succeeded. Reticulating splines. Launching. Doing all the things. All right. And it looks like it's done. Yeah, so deploying application done. So if we come over here to Heroku at this point, go into our new application, go to Open App. There we go. That was my simple demo app that literally just pumped out Hello World to the screen. That's the view source of it. So not the most impressive of applications, but hey, I didn't want to get bogged down in all those details. So that's all it takes. I mean, it's like I literally, did it before your eyes up here that, you can start with a new fresh application and you can have all of this cloud story just done just in minutes. And even if you had to read documentation and stuff, I'll probably give you an afternoon. And that's really powerful that you don't have to sit and think about all of this infrastructure goo and everything is just handled for you, which I think is totally awesome. So, going back to my slide deck here. So I kind of showed you these 3 points, but hey, we like Flare too, so let's add some of that. So there's all sorts of fun stuff you can do. That's interesting. I have not seen this fail with .6 before. Let's check this out. I don't know what's going on here. Why did this fail? Failed to deploy. Odd. Wonder why it tried to deploy more than one thing. I don't know. Interesting. So for whatever reason, I can't understand why well, now I understand why it says the build's failing, because there's one piece of it failing, so everything is, now it's saying build error. But if you've ever been on GitHub and you log in and you look at the README and people have all these cool icons and you're like, hey, how do I get those cool icons? It shows their download count and their build status and how popular they are and all that sort of stuff. So it's well, how do I get that? So one of the ways you can get that is, at least in terms of your build results with Travis CI, they expose this. So if we look at this image URL, if you can read that back there, so it just exposes you an SVG image that you can just pop right in your GitHub README, and you can just use it. So I'm just going to come over here to GitHub. We'll just do it right on their web UI. So README Markdown. Click on the nice little edit this file. And you do have to write some Markdown. So if you're not familiar with Markdown, this is kind of the syntax for just doing an image. And if you want to add some fancy hover text, so you could just do something like Travis CI build status. And this will put it as an image. If you're not familiar with Markdown, there's all sorts of great documentation, and I think Markdown's totally awesome. It's kind of a nice, simple way to make things beautiful and consistent, and I recommend looking into it if you haven't. So we added this image. Just come down here, and I'm going to commit directly to the master branch, which if you're working with teammates, they might hit you with sticks or something. So, but this is just a demo, so we're totally cool. All right, so now we have our build error, which is interesting, but that's what it's shown over here, and that's what it's showing over here. Ideally, this would say success. Yeah. So once you've realized, like, hey, I got my Travis thing, like you realize, like, there's all sorts of crazy things you can add. Like, I haven't found any repos that like get like the holy crap, you have so many badges award. I haven't found any of those yet, but like you could totally be that person right here. So you could do like your GitHub releases, your gem, MyGit, Chocolatey. Like there's all sorts of stuff here that's pre-built. So it's shields.io and it's pixel perfect, retina ready, fast, consistent, hackable, no tracing, just cool badges for all sorts of different things. So if you're using like things for code coverage, you can display that right on your repo. So if you're running like an open source project and you want to show people, like, hey, I have good test coverage, like you can kind of expose it through the use of these badges, and you can put your download count and that sort of thing. So I created a Chocolatey package at some point, and I'm coming up, I think at this point I'm over 9,000 downloads, so I think once I hit 10,000, maybe that'd be like the time to be like, hey, I should put the cool badge, on the repo or something, like, because, hey, I got 10,000, But, yeah, so there's all sorts of cool stuff on here that you can add. So how are we doing on time? Just one quick check. All right, great. So I kind of mentioned the whole building everything. So I'm building 4 different versions of Node.js. Really, I only need one of those, but it's a cloud service. CPU is free to me. It's not my memory. It's not making my home warm. I'm not paying for the electricity. So hey, build everything, like, because why not? And if you build pull requests, like if somebody contributes to your open source project, or if you're working in GitHub, in a work setting, you can find out very quickly if a pull request is going to work or not if you have something like this building it. So, if it's showing that the pull request fails, the build for not passing tests, it's like, well, I don't even really need to evaluate this because I'm not merging it in because it's failing. So, kind of enables a lot of those scenarios. And if you're running a build server and you have a bunch of different pull requests with GitHub, the way things work, if you have 6 open pull requests and one of them gets merged, it now has to rebuild the ones that, because the merge point changed and stuff happens behind the scenes, so it might have to rebuild a bunch of stuff. But hey, if it's just done with Travis CI in the cloud, like you don't have to worry about having enough build agents on your back end and being able to keep up with that. And if your team's working in such a way where you have a bunch of open pull requests, it's like, let the cloud deal with it. So I think that's kind of the notion of the cloud, though. It's like, we'll just let other people deal with it. So Travis CI has all sorts of different deployment options. So their supported providers list is reasonably large. One thing I still don't see here is Azure Web Sites. I think it might be cool because where I work, we rely pretty heavily on Azure Web Sites, and I think it'd be cool if they just added that as a first-class thing here. So, Azure Web Sites supports Node.js applications, so it'd be cool if I could just push right to it. Just saying. So we did Heroku here today, but you could do Node.jitsu. You could do, if you had an open source, Ruby gem, you could pump it up there. All sorts of, GitHub releases, yeah. And if it's not supported here, you could, just basically just build your own if you needed to. I believe you could just specify the shell script necessary to do what you need to do. But if you can use one of these pre-built things, like, that's awesome, because then you don't have to deal with it. So that configuration file, if you're having problems with the configuration file, if you just search for like Travis CI linter, you'll find this lovely tool, hopefully. So you can either enter your GitHub repository or actually just paste the contents in here. And this is basically if you're just having some sort of catastrophic problem, or if you just want to test it before you even push it up to GitHub. So if I copy pasted the text in here, which I can do, just so we can see it work. So I'm opening up the .travis.yaml configuration file. And I'm just pasting it in here. I'm going to click validate. And hooray, your .travis.yaml seems to be solid. So which I expect because I deployed it to Heroku, so I'm expecting it to say that. And I know what you're saying, like, hey, so how many people in the room are like primarily .NET developers? And I'm kind of raising my hand at this point in my life too. So I know what you're saying, like, but this is .NET, like, come on, like, I can't do any of this cool stuff. Like, I'm on .NET, like, it is what it is. So I don't necessarily, am I missing a slide? This is odd. Oh, no. So as of, today, I recently adjusted the date, but I still have the same recommendation. I'm basically saying like Travis CI in terms of .NET, like, I don't know. Like, if you know what mono is, and if you know that it's going to be good enough for you, then Travis CI might be a good fit for you. But if you don't know what it is, or you're not sure, like, I'd recommend kind of steering clear of it, because you can end up with a lot of unnecessary headaches and things just not working. But mono is basically like I don't know if it's like the Linux runtime. I mean, somebody else might know better than myself, what's going on with that. But I recommend, these other services, at least at this point in time. Maybe when vNext rolls around, maybe we'll have a better story for a lot of this stuff, and that'll be great, but that might not be till next year. So TeamCity is what we use pretty heavily where I work. So if you have an open source project, though, you can get free TeamCity. So there's this Code Better CI. And if you have an open source project, like, you actually have to like submit an application and they'll add you to their environment. So it's not something you can just sign up for willy-nilly, unfortunately. But it is an option. Normally, TeamCity is something you'd have to install on your machine. And that's actually what we do at my work, is we have it installed. We have a number of build agents, but it's completely managed in-house. It's in our server room, that sort of thing. So this is kind of what TeamCity looks like. I'm not going to delve into it too much, but they have a bunch of different things getting built here, which my work one does not look anywhere near this long. But yeah, so I'm not going to dig into TeamCity too much, but it is a good option if you're doing .NET development. But I am going to look into AppVeyor a little more heavily. So AppVeyor is kind of similar to Travis CI. You can think of it in the same manner, but it's just another one of those cloud services, that are available for, just building your code in the cloud. So when you log into AppVeyor, this is what this guy looks like. So at this point, I have two different things building. This thing I built for work, and I got this C# Cloud CI thing. So it's basically just a simple demo, kind of in the same manner as the Node.js simple demo, but I basically just build out a simple C# application. It's got the .solution file, but it doesn't have a build script, which is an important thing to note. One of the things with .NET is every time you need a build script, for me, it's like go poach an existing build script, because writing MS build and having everything work is kind of non-trivial, and it's kind of unfortunate, and I'm hoping that story becomes better in vNext. But as of today, I mean, it's kind of painful whenever you need to do that stuff. So it's usually go find one that's working, poach it, use it that way. So there is no build script here, so that kind of potentially complicates things in terms of, well, how does this thing know how to run? How does it work? I haven't configured anything. So if you don't want to configure a build script and do a lot of fancy stuff, AppVeyor is pretty awesome for just figuring it out for you, which I don't know if it's necessarily the recommended best practice, but it seems to do it. So they have the same output as, if it'll open here. Yeah, so you can see kind of the same command line output as Travis CI, but it's either command or PowerShell going on here. So you can see that it says discovering tests OK, and here's the test assembly. And it ran XUnit, it ran my tests, and everything passed. But remember, I said I didn't have a build script. So it's like, so how did that kind of magic happen? So if we come over into the settings, wait for it, and we go into tests, it's got this test assemblies automatically discovered. So that in and of itself is pretty cool. So, if you're looking for a service to host your .NET stuff and, put it up in the cloud, like, I think this is a great place to start. If you don't even have a build script, you can have it wired up. Ideally, it just detects everything, runs all your tests, just figures it out for you. So if you did have a build script, you could do script, PowerShell, and maybe you have like this build CMD file, you could specify it there. But you can also just do this auto and, it just automatically detected my test assemblies and took care of that stuff for you. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, it just shows you the same list. I could kick off another build. I have noticed though with AppVeyor, it seems like the build queue does take a little bit longer. So if you were seeing how snappy Travis CI was going, I did a rebuild of one of these yesterday and it did take a little bit of time. So I guess don't be alarmed if it looks like it's just sitting in the queue. I mean, you might just need to give it a bit rather than just assuming that the thing's dead. So yeah, so that's a great tool for the .NETers in the room, which includes myself. So we checked out AppVeyor. So how are we doing on time? We got time. So I'm just going to demonstrate, like I mentioned, that building of the pull requests thing. So I was just going to demonstrate how that works. So let's just make a new branch. We'll do the whole pull request thing. If you're not familiar with this and Git, you can see me after. I'd be more than happy to explain how the whole pull request workflow thing works, but I'm just going to kind of breeze through it here. So call this, we'll call this branch failing test. So I'm just going to create a failing test, kind of show you what that looks like. So this is my lovely test file. So I expect true to be true. If this test ever fails how it's written, just throw your computer out the window and stamp on it after it falls out the window, because I don't even know what's happening anymore. So I'm expecting true to be false. I'm assuming that's going to fail every time. If it doesn't, I don't even know. So add failing test. Push that up to GitHub. Nope, not master. That is not what I wanted to do. Origin failing test. There we go. So now I have a branch up on GitHub. Make a pull request, add failing test, bam. All right, so if someone was committing to, or contributing to your open source project, they might submit you a pull request. So Travis CI is all linked up here with GitHub, and it's just already building that pull request and it's taking care of it. So, which is pretty cool. So if I had a whole list of pull requests here, you can see the current status. So you can see this one's currently running. That's interesting. Oh yeah, it failed because I just created that failing test. Silly me.
So it's building it as if you had already done the merge into master, even though you haven't done that yet.
Yeah, so the question is about if it's building the result of the merge or whether it's building the pull request. What it's actually doing under the hood is it's doing fetch, in my case origin, it's doing refs pull one merge. That's what it's doing the build result of. So it's doing the result of the merge should it take place. But it's actually, with TeamCity, with my work stuff, that's what it builds, but this one's actually doing both. So this is building the result of the merge and the actual pull request itself. I don't know which one's which in this case, but it's actually building both, is my understanding. So you can kind of see, did the contributor contribute working code at their point in time, but the code has since evolved and now it no longer works quite right? So you can kind of at least see that check, did it work on their machine and then they pushed it up and it just didn't work anymore because they're not operating against the latest on master, if they did a pull request against master, but yeah. So yeah, so we have some failing stuff. If you click on details, it takes you right to it. And it's and I remember I did all of this in the context of a talk, which is totally awesome. All of these services are pre-built, they're already ready to go. Everything is awesome. I'll spare you the singing of that. So yeah, so that's kind of what that looks like. So kind of just to conclude, just remember this stuff is pretty easy. Like we just ran through it all in the context of a talk. And I think that in and of itself is just a really powerful thing that, somebody who's a new developer, like at the end of the day, like they could probably reasonably piece together a simple web application. And at the end of the day, be like, hey, I've got this thing up on the web, check it out at this address. I mean, they could have a simple example up there. I mean, it's not like computing of old in the sense of like I can't imagine what went into like the whole 1985 creating, Super Mario Brothers. Like I can't imagine what kind of technical stuff you would have had to accomplish. Where now it's like you might be able to program that in a weekend if you know what you're doing. But at the time, that might have been some sort of technical marvel that you were able to accomplish that. But at this point, it's like we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and a lot of these services just exist and they're really well integrated. And I recommend take advantage of that where possible. But a lot of this stuff is tricky, and I've done this talk before, had it recorded once, and I was kind of just fumbling, couldn't figure it out. So if you do have some problems, computing is tricky sometimes, and all it takes is you miss that one little tiny thing and nothing works. So if you run through it and you're getting, you're having problems and you're getting discouraged, remember we're all human, we all, make these little silly errors time to time. But hey, if you get really stuck, you can always ping me if it's about this stuff, and I can always try to help you out there. But I'll take any questions. You can always ping me on Twitter @KenDaleIV. So, thank you.